The dust kicked up around Harrison Xavier's boots as his horse stumbled over loose rocks, and he wondered if riding aimlessly through the Colorado Territory in July of 1873 was any better than drinking himself to death back in Denver. At least out here, the sun beat down hard enough to make a man forget his troubles for brief moments between each labored breath. He had been riding for 3 days since leaving the city, no particular destination in mind, just away from the memories that haunted every street corner and saloon. Sarah had been dead for 6 months now, taken by scarlet fever so quickly he barely had time to say goodbye. The engagement ring he had saved 2 years to buy still sat in his saddlebag, never placed on her finger because he had been waiting for the perfect moment that never came. The landscape stretched endlessly before him, all scrub brush and red earth, with the Rocky Mountains looming in the distance like silent sentinels. His throat was parched, and his canteen had run dry an hour back. The mare beneath him was tired too, her pace slowing with each passing mile. He needed to find water soon, or they would both be in serious trouble. That was when he saw her. At first, Harrison thought the heat was playing tricks on his eyes. A figure moved in the distance, too far away to make out clearly, but definitely human. As he urged his horse forward, the scene became clearer. A woman stood along a fence line, wrestling with wooden posts and barbed wire. She wore men's trousers tucked into worn boots, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up past her elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across her face. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. Out here, a woman alone had every right to be suspicious of strangers. As he drew closer, he could see she was working on a section of fence that had clearly been damaged, maybe by cattle or the recent storms that had swept through the territory. Her movements were practiced and efficient, despite the obvious difficulty of the task. "Afternoon," Harrison called out when he was within reasonable speaking distance, keeping his hands visible on the saddle horn. The woman spun around, and he got his first real look at her face. She could not have been more than 25, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her eyes were a striking shade of green, sharp and assessing as they took him in. One hand moved instinctively to the holster at her hip, though she did not draw the revolver resting there. "Afternoon," she replied, her voice steady but cautious. "You lost, just passing through. My canteen's empty and my horse needs water. Is there a town nearby?" She studied him for a long moment, and Harrison had the distinct impression she could read every sorrow etched into his face. Finally, she seemed to reach some internal decision and relaxed slightly, though her hand stayed near her weapon. Colorado City is about 8 miles northeast. "There's a creek runs through my property about half a mile that way." She gestured with her free hand. "You are welcome to water your horse there. I would offer you a drink myself, but I left my own water back at the house." "I appreciate that, madam. Name's Harrison Xavier." He tipped his hat respectfully. "Annabel Carson," she said, turning back to the fence. "The creek's easy enough to find. Just follow the fence line east until you see the cottonwoods." Harrison should have thanked her and ridden on, but something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the way she attacked the fence repair with a determined set to her shoulders that spoke of too many tasks and not enough hands to complete them. Maybe it was the first flicker of curiosity he had felt about anything since Sarah's death. Or maybe he was just tired of his own company and the dark thoughts that came with solitude. "That fence giving you trouble?" he asked. Annabel glanced back at him, surprise flickering across her features. "Nothing I cannot handle." "Did not say you could not handle it." "Just looks like it might go faster with 2 pairs of hands." Harrison dismounted, his legs stiff from long hours in the saddle. If you do not mind the help, I would be happy to lend mine in exchange for that water." She looked at him suspiciously, as if trying to figure out his angle. Harrison could not blame her. Men did not usually offer help without expecting something in return, especially not to women working land alone. But whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her concerns because she gave a short nod. "All right, then. I need to get these posts set properly before I can string the new wire. The whole section came down in a storm last week, and the cattle have been wandering where they should not." Harrison tied his horse to a nearby post and walked over to examine the damage. 3 posts had snapped clean through, probably rotted from the inside before the wind took them down. The barbed wire lay tangled in the dirt, dangerous and unusable. It was hard work even for 2 people, back-breaking work for one woman alone. "You have replacement posts?" he asked. "Over there." Annabel pointed to a small pile of fresh-cut timber lying in the shade of a scraggly juniper tree. "Dug the holes yesterday." They worked in silence at first, falling into an easy rhythm. Harrison positioned the posts while Annabel checked them for alignment, tamping down the earth around each one with practiced efficiency. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat soon soaked through Harrison's shirt, but there was something satisfying about the physical labor. It gave his restless mind something to focus on besides grief. "You work this land alone?" he asked after they had set the second post. "Mostly. I have a hand who comes by twice a week to help with the heavy work, but he has his own spread to manage." Annabel wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "My father died 8 months ago, left me the ranch and about 100 head of cattle. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you." Her voice was quiet, and Harrison heard the echo of his own pain in those 2 simple words. "He taught me everything about running this place, but I do not think he expected I would be doing it alone. He figured I would be married by now, I suppose." Harrison understood that feeling, the weight of expectations that would never be met, futures that had dissolved like morning mist. He drove the post-hole digger into the hard earth with more force than necessary, channeling his emotions into the work. "What brings you out this way?" Annabel asked, her tone conversational but genuinely curious. "You do not have the look of a drifter, but you are clearly not from around here." "Denver," Harrison said simply. "Needed to get away for a while." She did not push for more information, which he appreciated. Too many people had tried to console him with empty platitudes and well-meaning advice after Sarah died. Annabel seemed to understand that some wounds were too fresh to discuss with strangers, even helpful strangers mending fences under the brutal Colorado sun. They worked through the afternoon, setting posts and stringing new wire. The task required concentration, especially the barbed wire, which could tear skin to ribbons if handled carelessly. Harrison found himself watching Annabel when she was not looking, impressed by her competence and the quiet strength she radiated. She did not complain about the heat or the difficulty of the work, just kept pushing forward with a determination he recognized in himself, or at least in the man he used to be. When the last section of wire was finally secured, Annabel stepped back and surveyed their work with satisfaction. "That will hold," she declared. "Should have done this 3 days ago, but there's always something else that needs doing first." "I know that feeling," Harrison said, though his context was entirely different. There had always been another task, another excuse to put off proposing to Sarah properly, to start the life they had planned. And then time had run out. "Come on," Annabel said, gathering up the tools. "Let us get you and your horse that water I promised. And I suspect we could both use some ourselves." They walked along the fence line toward the creek, leading Harrison's tired mare between them. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The air remained hot, but there was a hint of evening coolness beginning to creep in. The creek, when they reached it, was a welcome sight. It was not wide, maybe 15 feet across, but the water ran clear and cold from mountain snowmelt. Cottonwood trees provided blessed shade, their leaves rustling in the faint breeze. Harrison's horse waded in immediately, drinking deeply. Annabel knelt by the water's edge and cupped her hands, drinking her fill before splashing water on her face and neck. Harrison did the same, the cold water a shock to his overheated skin but wonderfully refreshing. He refilled his canteen and drank again, feeling almost human for the first time in days. "You are welcome to make camp here for the night," Annabel offered, standing and brushing dirt from her knees. "It is a good spot, and it will be full dark soon. Colorado City is not far, but these trails can be treacherous after sunset if you do not know them." Harrison considered the offer. The smart thing would be to accept her hospitality and move on in the morning. But looking at Annabel in the golden light of late afternoon, her face open and genuine in a way that reminded him there were still good people in the world, he found himself wanting to stay longer than one night. "I appreciate the offer," he said carefully, "but I would not want to impose or cause you any trouble. A woman living alone, people might talk if a strange man camps on her property." Annabel laughed, a clear, bright sound that startled a bird from the nearby trees. "Mr. Xavier, people in Colorado City have been talking about me since the day I announced I was keeping the ranch instead of selling it to the highest bidder. A few more whispers will not make much difference. Even so, I would not want to damage your reputation." "My reputation is that I am stubborn, difficult, and too independent for my own good," she said with a slight smile. "All true, by the way. But if it makes you feel better, my ranch house is a good mile from here. You would just be camping by the creek like any traveler making use of public water." It was a compromise that satisfied propriety while still accepting her generous offer. Harrison nodded his agreement. "Then I am grateful. It has been a long few days on the trail." "I imagined so." Annabel picked up the tools they had brought from the fence line. "I need to get these back to the barn before the light fails completely. There is good firewood under those cottonwoods, and the fishing's decent if you have a line. I will check on you in the morning to make sure you found everything all right. You do not have to go to that trouble." "It is no trouble. Besides, I ride this section every morning anyway to check on the cattle." She settled her hat more firmly on her head. "Good night, Mr. Xavier. Harrison, please. And good night, Miss Carson." "Annabel," she corrected, then turned and walked back toward her ranch house, moving with long, confident strides that covered ground quickly. Harrison watched her go, then set about making camp. He unsaddled his horse and rubbed her down before hobbling her where she could graze on the grass growing along the creek bank. The cottonwoods did indeed have plenty of deadfall beneath them, dry and perfect for a fire. He gathered enough to last through the night and arranged his bedroll in a sheltered spot. As darkness settled over the land, Harrison sat by his small fire and tried to remember the last time he had felt anything other than numb despair. The physical work had been good, giving him something concrete to focus on. And Annabel herself had been a surprise, competent and self-sufficient in a way that commanded respect. She had not looked at him with pity or tried to fix whatever was broken in him. She had just accepted his help and treated him like a normal person, which was more than most people had managed lately. He pulled out the packet of dried beef from his saddlebag and ate a joyless dinner, washing it down with creek water. The stars emerged one by one overhead, so many more than he could ever see in Denver. An owl hooted somewhere in the darkness, hunting. The night sounds of the wilderness surrounded him, strangely comforting in their indifference to human suffering. Sleep came easier than it had in weeks, his body exhausted from honest labor and the clean air. Morning arrived with birdsong and the pale light of dawn filtering through the cottonwood leaves. Harrison woke feeling more rested than he had any right to, considering he had slept on the hard ground. He rekindled the fire and put coffee on to boil, using the grounds he had packed in Denver that now seemed like a lifetime ago. He was sipping his second cup when he heard hoofbeats approaching. Annabel rode into view on a sturdy paint horse, sitting the saddle with easy grace. She had changed into a clean shirt, this one a pale yellow that brightened her face, but still wore the practical trousers and boots. "Morning," she called out. "I see you survived the night." "Barely," Harrison said with a slight smile, the expression feeling strange on his face after so many weeks of grief. The owls were very threatening. She dismounted and accepted the cup of coffee he offered, wrapping her hands around it despite the morning warmth. "I wanted to thank you again for the help yesterday. That fence would have taken me all day alone, and I have 100 other things that need doing. Happy to help. It felt good to do something useful." Harrison poured himself more coffee from the battered pot. "I was planning to head into Colorado City this morning, see about finding some work for a while. You would not happen to know anyone looking to hire a hand, would you?" Annabel looked at him over the rim of her cup, those green eyes assessing. "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Anything honest. I have ranch experience, can handle horses and cattle. Did some smithing work back in Denver, though I am no master at it. General labor, whatever needs doing." "Can you handle a gun?" The question was blunt, but Harrison appreciated her directness. "Well enough." "I am not a gunfighter, but I can shoot straight when I need to." She was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with some internal debate. Finally, she seemed to reach a decision. "I could use help around the ranch. The twice-weekly hand is good, but it is not enough. Fences need mending, cattle need tending, and there is a barn roof that is going to cave in before winter if someone does not fix it soon. I cannot pay much, maybe $30 a month plus meals, but there is a bunkhouse you could use." Harrison's first instinct was to refuse. Getting involved in someone else's life, making any kind of commitment, felt impossible when he could barely manage his own existence. But the alternative was drifting aimlessly or drinking himself into oblivion, and neither option held much appeal. "I do not know how long I would stay," he said honestly. "I am not in a good place right now, and I would not want to leave you in the lurch if I decided to move on. I appreciate the honesty." Annabel finished her coffee and handed him back the cup. "How about this? Give it a week. If it does not work out, no hard feelings. At least I will get some of the urgent repairs done, and you will have a place to stay while you figure out what comes next." It was a fair offer, maybe more than fair considering his vague warnings about his unreliable state of mind. Harrison found himself nodding before he could overthink it. "All right, 1 week and we will see how it goes." "Good." Annabel smiled, and it transformed her entire face, making her look younger and less burdened. "Finish your coffee and break camp. The bunkhouse has not been used in a few months, so it will need airing out, but it is solid and dry." Harrison packed up his gear quickly, long practice making the task automatic. He saddled his horse and followed Annabel back along the fence line toward her ranch house. In daylight, he could see the full scope of her property. It was not a large spread by Colorado territory standards, maybe a few hundred acres of grazing land, but it was well maintained despite being short-handed. The cattle he spotted looked healthy, and the fences, aside from the storm damage they had repaired, were in good condition. The ranch house itself was a sturdy log structure with a covered porch and a stone chimney. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Harrison caught the scent of bacon cooking. His stomach rumbled, reminding him that dried beef was a poor substitute for a real meal. "That is the barn," Annabel said, pointing to a large building badly in need of fresh paint. "The bunkhouse is just beyond it. Let me show you." The bunkhouse was small but serviceable, with 4 narrow beds, a potbelly stove for heat, and a table with chairs. Dust covered everything and the air smelled stale, but the roof looked sound and the windows were intact. "Like I said, it needs airing out," Annabel repeated. "But it will be comfortable enough once you get it cleaned up. There is a pump out back for washing up, and you are welcome to take meals at the house. I usually have breakfast at sunrise, dinner at noon, and supper when the work is done. This is more than adequate, thank you. Come up to the house when you are settled. I will have breakfast waiting." Annabel headed back toward the main house, leaving Harrison to explore his new temporary quarters. He threw open the windows and swept out the worst of the dust and cobwebs. It did not take long to stow his few possessions and make one of the beds with his bedroll. The simplicity of the space appealed to him. No memories haunted these walls, no ghosts of what might have been. When he walked up to the main house, Annabel was setting plates on a rough-hewn table. The interior was neat and spare, with handmade furniture and a few personal touches that spoke of the family who had lived here. A photograph on the mantel showed a stern-looking man with Annabel's eyes, probably her late father. "Sit," she instructed, placing a platter of bacon, eggs, and biscuits on the table. "We have a full day ahead." The food was simple but well prepared, and Harrison ate with genuine appetite for the first time in recent memory. They discussed the work that needed doing as they ate. The barn roof was the priority, followed by more fence repairs and checking on a section of the herd that had wandered toward the far edge of the property. "I should tell you," Annabel said as she cleared the plates, "there might be trouble with some of the neighboring ranchers. A few of them made offers to buy this place after my father died, and they were not happy when I turned them down. Nothing serious yet, just some petty harassment. Cattle going missing, fences getting cut. Could be coincidence, could be deliberate. You report it to the law." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The sheriff in Colorado City is friendly enough, but he has made it clear that a woman rancher's problems are not high on his priority list. I am on my own out here, which is why I asked about your gun skills." Harrison understood what she was really asking. "I will keep my eyes open and my gun handy, but I am not looking for trouble, and I hope it does not find us. That makes 2 of us." Annabel hung her apron on a peg by the door. "Come on, let us get a look at that barn roof before the day gets any hotter." They spent the morning assessing the damage and making a list of supplies they would need. The roof was worse than it had looked from the ground, with several rotted sections that would need replacing before the structure was safe. It would be a big job, probably take the better part of a week, even with 2 people working steadily. "I will ride into Colorado City tomorrow for lumber and nails," Annabel said, making notes in a small ledger she carried. "You can start clearing out the loft and pulling up the damaged sections." They worked through the heat of the day, breaking only for a quick dinner of cold chicken and bread. Harrison found himself slipping into the rhythm of ranch work, his body remembering skills he had learned years ago working on his uncle's spread in Kansas. The physical labor continued to be a blessing, keeping his mind occupied and his hands busy. As the afternoon wore on, Annabel worked alongside him, never asking him to do anything she was not willing to do herself. She was strong and capable, but Harrison noticed the lines of exhaustion around her eyes and the careful way she moved, as if every muscle ached. She was pushing herself too hard, trying to do the work of 3 men alone. "You should take a break," he suggested when he caught her wincing as she lifted a heavy beam. "I am fine," she said automatically, but her pale face suggested otherwise. "When did you last take a full day off?" Annabel stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "Day off? This is a ranch, Harrison. The work does not stop just because I am tired." "No, but you are no good to the ranch if you work yourself into the ground. Even horses need rest." He climbed down from the loft and stood facing her. "I am here now. Let me handle the heavy work for a few days while you catch up on sleep and whatever else you have been neglecting." For a moment, he thought she would argue, too proud and independent to accept help even when she desperately needed it. But then something in her seemed to crack just a little, and she nodded slowly. "Maybe you are right," she admitted quietly. "I have not been sleeping well. Every time I close my eyes, I think of something else that needs doing, some way the ranch might fail if I am not vigilant enough." Harrison recognized that feeling too, the constant anxiety that came with loss and uncertainty. "The ranch is not going anywhere tonight. Take the evening off, get some real rest. I will finish up here and check on the cattle before dark. You do not even know where to find them." "Then draw me a map. I can follow directions." He kept his tone light, trying to ease her obvious reluctance to relinquish control. Finally, Annabel agreed. She sketched a rough map of the property boundaries and the areas where the cattle usually grazed, then headed back to the house with instructions to call if he ran into any problems. Harrison spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the ranch on horseback, getting familiar with the land and checking on the cattle as promised. The herd was in good condition, about 90 head by his count, a mix of longhorns and shorthorns. He spotted a few calves' late births that would need watching to make sure they stayed healthy. The work, the open sky, and the simple purpose of it all settled something in Harrison's chest that had been restless and aching since Sarah's death. He was not healed, might never fully heal from that loss, but out here under the vast Colorado sky with honest work to do, the pain felt more manageable somehow. When he returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, he found Annabel sitting on her porch, a cup of tea in her hands and an expression of peaceful contentment on her face that he had not seen before. "Everything all right out there?" she asked. "All accounted for." "Found a cow with a cut on her leg, cleaned it and put some salve on it. Should be fine." He tied his horse to the porch rail. "How about you? Did you manage to rest?" "I did, actually. Read for a while, took a bath, even dozed off for an hour." She smiled at him. "Thank you for pushing me to take the break. I did not realize how much I needed it." "You are welcome." Harrison hesitated, then sat on the porch steps, not quite joining her but not walking away either. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you decide to keep the ranch?" "It would have been easier to sell. Move somewhere with more opportunities for a woman alone." Annabel was quiet for a long moment, watching the last light fade from the sky. "This land has been in my family for 20 years. My father built this house with his own hands, raised me here after my mother died giving birth. Every fence post, every acre has his sweat and blood in it. Selling would have felt like erasing him, like saying all his work meant nothing. That makes sense. Plus, I love this place. I love the work, as hard as it is. I love the cattle and the land and the independence of it. Maybe I am a fool for thinking I can make it work alone, but I have to try." She looked at him directly. "Why did you leave Denver?" Harrison had known the question was coming eventually. He owed her some honesty, given that he was living on her property and sharing her meals. "I was engaged to be married. Woman named Sarah, sweetest person you would ever meet. She died of scarlet fever 6 months ago. I could not stand being in the city anymore, seeing all the places we had planned to build our life together. I am so sorry, Harrison. That is a terrible loss." "It is. He found, surprisingly, that he could talk about it without his throat closing up entirely. Everyone kept telling me time would heal it, that I would move on eventually. But I did not want to move on. I wanted her back, and since I could not have that, I figured I would just drift until I figured out what else there was. And what have you figured out? That mending fences is better than drinking myself to death, at least for now. It was a dark joke, but Annabel understood the truth beneath it. Well, I am glad you chose the fences, she said softly, and I am glad you ended up here. They sat in comfortable silence as full darkness fell, and the stars emerged overhead. Harrison felt something shift inside him, some small loosening of the tight knot of grief he had been carrying. Annabel did not try to fix him or tell him everything would be all right. She just sat with him in the darkness, two wounded people finding unexpected companionship in shared work and honest conversation. The week Harrison had promised turned into 2, then 3. The barn roof was repaired, sections of fence were mended, and the ranch began to look more prosperous and less desperately maintained. Harrison fell into the rhythm of ranch life, rising with the sun and working until exhaustion drove him to his bunk each night. But more than the work, it was Annabel herself who kept him there. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, tough and tender in equal measures. She could deliver a breech calf with the skill of a veteran ranch hand, then spend her evening reading poetry by lamplight. She never complained about the endless work or the loneliness of her situation, just faced each day with quiet determination. They began taking meals together regularly, conversation flowing easily between them. Annabel told him about growing up on the ranch, learning to ride before she could properly walk, listening to her father's stories about the early days of Colorado Territory. Harrison shared memories of his childhood in Kansas, his move to Denver to work as a clerk in a freight office, his courtship of Sarah. Talking about Sarah hurt less when he talked to Annabel. She listened without judgment, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than morbid curiosity. And slowly, gradually, Harrison began to remember his fiancée with more joy than pain, recalling happy moments instead of just the awful final days. One evening, about a month after Harrison's arrival, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Annabel had made a peach pie from fruit she had preserved the previous summer, and they ate generous slices while the sky put on its nightly show. "I have been thinking," Annabel said carefully, "about offering you permanent work, if you are interested in staying, that is." Harrison's heart did an odd little skip. He had been thinking the same thing but had not known how to broach the subject. "I would like that. The work is good and I have grown fond of this place. Just the place." Annabel asked, and there was something in her tone that made Harrison look at her more closely. In the fading light, her face was half in shadow, but he could see the nervous hope in her eyes. And he realized with a start that what he had been feeling these past weeks was not just appreciation for her hospitality or respect for her abilities. It was something deeper, something he had thought he would never feel again. "Not just the place," he admitted quietly. "I have grown fond of you too, Annabel." She smiled, and it was like sunrise after a long night. "Good, because I have grown quite fond of you as well, and I was beginning to worry I was imagining things." "You are not imagining anything." Harrison set down his plate and moved closer, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. "But I need to be honest with you. I still love Sarah. I probably always will in some way. I would not expect otherwise. Loving someone who died does not mean you cannot love someone living." Annabel reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and calloused from work. "My father loved my mother until his dying day, but he had room in his heart for me too, Hearts are bigger than we think. I do not want to hurt you. Then do not. Be honest with me, work beside me, and let whatever is growing between us have room to breathe. That is all I ask. It was more than fair. It was generous and understanding in a way that made Harrison's throat tight with emotion. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture of respect and affection that felt right and good. I can do that, he promised. They sat together as darkness fell, hands linked, watching the stars emerge one by one. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Harrison allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be happiness in his future after all. The next few months brought changes both subtle and profound. Harrison settled fully into life on the ranch, no longer a temporary hand but Annabel's full partner in running the operation. They worked side by side from sunup to sundown, their movements synchronized and efficient from long practice. But it was the evenings Harrison treasured most. After the work was done and they had cleaned up from supper, they would sit on the porch and talk for hours. Sometimes, Annabel read aloud from her small collection of books, her voice bringing stories to life in the quiet darkness. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, content in each other's company. Their relationship deepened slowly, carefully, like a fence being mended one post at a time. Harrison was grateful for Annabel's patience, her willingness to let things develop at their own pace. She never pushed him to move faster than he was ready, never demanded declarations of love or promises he was not prepared to make, but his feelings grew despite his caution, maybe even because of it. He found himself thinking of her first thing in the morning and last thing at night. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes made him want to make more of them. The competent way she handled every challenge that arose filled him with admiration and pride. And when she smiled at him, really smiled with her whole face, it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. It was late September when trouble finally arrived in the form of 3 men on horseback. Harrison was working on reinforcing the corral when he spotted them riding up the main road to the ranch. Something about the way they carried themselves, arrogant and aggressive, put his senses on high alert. Annabel emerged from the barn as the men drew close, wiping her hands on her trousers and settling her hat more firmly on her head. Harrison moved to stand beside her, close enough to help if needed but not so close as to suggest she could not handle herself. "Miss Carson," the lead rider said, touching his hat brim in a mockery of politeness. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. "I am Albert Danvers. I own the Double D Ranch northeast of here." "I know who you are, Mr. Danvers," Annabel replied coolly. "What can I do for you? I have come with another offer to buy your property. A generous offer, 20% above market value. You would be a fool to refuse." "Then I am a fool because I am refusing. This ranch is not for sale." Danvers's expression hardened. "You cannot run this place alone, girl. You are a woman trying to do a man's work, and it is only a matter of time before you fail. Save yourself the embarrassment and sell now while you can still get a decent price." "I am not alone," Annabel said, her voice steady despite the anger Harrison could see sparking in her eyes. "And I am doing just fine, as you can see if you look around. Now, I have asked you politely to leave. Do not make me ask impolitely." One of the other riders, a younger man with a nasty scar across his cheek, leaned forward in his saddle. "Big talk from a woman with only one hired hand to back her up. What happens if there is trouble? Think he can protect you from everything that might go wrong on a ranch this size?" Harrison spoke for the first time, his voice calm but carrying a clear warning. "I think you gentlemen should move along like the lady asked. You are not welcome here." Danvers turned his cold eyes on Harrison, assessing him like he might a horse at auction. "You are making a mistake, boy. This ranch is going to fail, and when it does, Miss Carson will have nothing. You would be smarter to find work elsewhere." "I am right where I want to be," Harrison replied, "and we are done being polite. Get off this property now, or I will remove you myself." For a tense moment, Harrison thought Danvers might push the issue. His hand drifted toward the gun at his hip, and the other two riders shifted in their saddles, ready for trouble. But Annabel pulled her own revolver with practiced ease, not aiming it at anyone but making her preparedness clear. "You heard the man," she said quietly. "Leave." Now, Danvers glared at them both, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "This is not over. You will regret refusing my generous offer, Miss Carson. Mark my words." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his two companions following. Harrison and Annabel stood watching until they disappeared down the road, neither speaking until the dust had settled. "That was Danvers," Annabel said unnecessarily, holstering her gun with hands that trembled slightly. "He has been trying to buy up all the small ranches in the area, consolidate them into one big operation. My father refused to sell, and now I have to. He threatened you." "Not directly. He is too smart for that, but the message was clear enough." She turned to look at Harrison, worry evident in her green eyes. "I am sorry you got dragged into this. If you want to leave, I would understand. Things might get dangerous." Harrison took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I am not going anywhere. We will face whatever comes together." Relief and gratitude flooded her face. She squeezed his hand tightly, drawing strength from his presence. "Thank you. I cannot tell you what it means to not be alone in this. You do not have to thank me. This is my fight now, too." He meant it absolutely. Somewhere along the way, Annabel's struggles had become his own, her battles worth fighting. The ranch had become home, and the woman beside him had become essential to his happiness in ways he was only beginning to fully understand. They increased their vigilance after Danvers's visit. Harrison rode the property line every day, checking for signs of sabotage or trespassers. They took turns standing watch at night, though nothing suspicious occurred in the immediate aftermath of the confrontation. But 2 weeks later, they discovered a section of fence cut and 20 head of cattle missing. The tracks led north, toward Danvers's land, but disappeared in the rocky terrain before they could follow them far enough to prove anything. "We should report this to the sheriff," Harrison insisted as they surveyed the damage. "And tell him what? That I think Danvers stole my cattle but have no proof. You know what he will say." Annabel's frustration was evident in every tense line of her body. "He will tell me I probably miscounted, that the cattle wandered off, that a woman should not be ranching if she cannot keep track of her own stock." Harrison wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. The law offered little protection to women like Annabel, especially when the accusations were against a powerful rancher like Albert Danvers. They were on their own. "Then we make it harder for him to steal from us," Harrison said. "We move the main herd closer to the house, keep them where we can watch them better, and we make it clear we are willing to defend what is ours." They spent the next week implementing those changes, working dawn to dusk to shift the cattle and reinforce the fences nearest the ranch buildings. It was exhausting work, but they drove themselves hard, knowing that appearing weak or vulnerable would only invite more trouble. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, they collapsed on the porch too tired even to eat a proper supper. Annabel had made sandwiches, which they consumed mechanically while watching the sun set in a blaze of orange glory. "Sometimes I wonder if I am being stubborn for no good reason," Annabel said quietly. "Maybe it would be easier to just sell and move on." "You want to sell?" Harrison asked. "No, not even a little bit." She leaned her head back against the porch post, eyes closed. "But I hate that my stubbornness might get you hurt. This is not your fight, Harrison, no matter what you said. It became my fight the moment I decided to stay. Before that, even." He set down his half-eaten sandwich and turned to face her fully. "Annabel, I need to tell you something." She opened her eyes, giving him her full attention despite her obvious exhaustion. "When I came here, I was broken. I did not think I would ever care about anything again. But you changed that. This ranch, this work, all of it gave me a reason to get up in the morning. You gave me hope when I thought I had lost it forever." He took her hand, marveling at how right it felt. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the day I found you mending that fence. And that means your fights are my fights, your dreams are my dreams. I am in this with you, all the way, for as long as you will have me." Tears glistened in Annabel's eyes, catching the fading sunlight. "I am falling in love with you too. I think I have been for a while now, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you would think I was trying to replace what you had with Sarah. You are not replacing anyone. What I felt for Sarah was real and good, and I will always treasure those memories. But what I feel for you is different, its own thing, just as real and just as good." He cupped her face gently with his free hand. "You are not second choice or consolation prize. You are the woman I choose here and now, knowing exactly what I am choosing." Annabel kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Harrison pulled her close, feeling something he had thought lost forever, the absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly who he was supposed to be with. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and smiling, the stars had begun to emerge overhead. They sat together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, and talked about the future. Not just surviving the troubles with Danvers, but real plans for expanding the herd, improving the ranch, building a life together. "I want you to be my wife," Harrison said sometime after midnight, the words coming easily and naturally. "If you will have me." "Yes," Annabel answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. They did not have a ring or champagne or any of the traditional trappings of an engagement, just each other and the stars overhead and the deep contentment of having found something precious and true. It was enough. It was everything. The next morning they rode into Colorado City together to see the preacher and arrange for a wedding. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with shops and businesses serving the surrounding ranching community. People stared as they passed, and Harrison heard whispers following in their wake. Annabel kept her head high, ignoring the gossip with practiced ease. Reverend Thomas was a kindly man in his 60s who had known Annabel since she was a child. He was delighted to hear of their engagement and agreed to perform the ceremony the following Sunday, giving them time to make whatever preparations they wanted. "It does not need to be fancy," Annabel assured Harrison as they left the church. "Just legal and binding is enough for me." "Me too. Though I would like to get you a ring, if you will let me." They stopped at the general store, where the proprietor showed them a modest selection of bands. Harrison chose a simple gold ring that fit Annabel's finger perfectly, paying for it with money he had saved from his wages. It was not the expensive ring he had bought for Sarah, but it represented something even more valuable, a future built on shared work and mutual respect, rather than youthful romantic dreams. As they were leaving the store, they ran into Sheriff Davis, a portly man with a graying mustache and tired eyes. He tipped his hat to Annabel with professional courtesy. "Miss Carson, I heard about your missing cattle. Anything new to report?" "No, Sheriff. They are still missing, and I still believe they were stolen." Annabel's tone was polite but cool. "I looked into it like I said I would. Danvers claims he has not seen any strays on his land, and I have no reason to doubt him. Davis shifted uncomfortably. Maybe they just wandered off further than you thought. 20 head do not just wander off through a cut fence, Sheriff. Well, without proof of wrongdoing, there is not much I can do. I suggest you keep better track of your stock. He touched his hat again and moved on, clearly considering the matter closed. Harrison felt Annabel tense with anger and frustration beside him. He put a steadying hand on her back, offering silent support. "He is useless," she muttered once the sheriff was out of earshot. "Danvers could steal every cow I own in broad daylight, and Davis would find a way to look the other way. Then we rely on ourselves, like we have been doing." Harrison guided her toward where they had tied their horses. "Come on, let us get back to the ranch. We have a wedding to prepare for." The thought of their upcoming marriage brightened Annabel's mood considerably. They spent the ride home making plans, simple plans for a simple ceremony, just what they wanted. Annabel would wear her mother's wedding dress, which she had carefully preserved. Harrison would borrow a proper suit from Tom, the hand who helped twice a week and who had become a friend to them both. Sunday arrived with perfect autumn weather, cool and clear with brilliant sunshine. Tom had agreed to stand up for Harrison, and his wife Martha would stand with Annabel. A few neighbors who were friendly to Annabel attended, filling the small church with warm wishes and genuine happiness for the couple. Annabel looked beautiful in her mother's ivory dress, her dark hair arranged in a simple style with wildflowers tucked into the braids. Harrison felt his breath catch when he saw her walking down the short aisle, her green eyes locked on his with absolute certainty and joy. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. Reverend Thomas spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of partnership, words that resonated deeply given the life Harrison and Annabel would be building together. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges came their way. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed his bride with tender reverence, feeling the broken pieces of his heart finally beginning to heal. This was not forgetting Sarah or betraying her memory. It was choosing to live fully again, to love again, to embrace the future rather than dwelling endlessly in the past. The small reception afterward was held at the church hall, with food provided by Martha and the other women who had attended. It was nothing fancy, just good simple food and honest celebration. Harrison watched Annabel laugh and talk with the guests, radiating happiness, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the chance to share his life with her. As evening approached and the guests began to depart, Tom pulled Harrison aside with a serious expression. "I am happy for you both, truly," Tom said quietly. "But you need to know there is talk. Danvers has been spreading rumors, saying you are a drifter who seduced Annabel to get control of her ranch. He is trying to turn public opinion against you both." Harrison felt a flash of anger but tamped it down. Let him talk. People who know Annabel will know the truth. Maybe. But Danvers has influence, and he is not above using it. Watch your back, Harrison. Men like him do not take losing well. The warning cast a shadow over what had been a perfect day, but Harrison refused to let Danvers poison his wedding celebration. He thanked Tom for the heads up and promised to be vigilant, then turned his attention back to his wife. They rode home as the sun set, both tired but happy. The ranch buildings looked welcoming in the fading light, home in the truest sense. Harrison had moved his things into the main house the night before, and now they would begin their married life together in earnest. "Happy?" Harrison asked as they unsaddled their horses. "Happier than I have been in a very long time," Annabel replied, smiling at him over her horse's back. "You?" "Same. I never thought I would feel this way again, but I am grateful I was wrong." They took care of the horses quickly, both eager to get inside and begin their first evening as a married couple. The house felt different now, charged with new possibility and promise. Harrison had started a fire in the main room before they left for the ceremony, and it still burned warmly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Annabel changed out of her wedding dress, hanging it carefully in the wardrobe before joining Harrison by the fire. She wore a simple cotton nightgown and had let down her hair so it fell in dark waves around her shoulders. She looked young and vulnerable and absolutely beautiful. "Come here," Harrison said softly, holding out his hand. She took it and let him pull her close, settling into his embrace with a contented sigh. They stood like that for a long time, swaying slightly to music only they could hear, savoring the moment and each other. "I love you," Annabel whispered against his chest. "I love you too," Harrison replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. They made love that night with tenderness and growing passion, learning each other's bodies and hearts in the flickering firelight. It was sweet and intense and perfect, a true union of two souls who had found each other against all odds. Afterward, lying tangled together in bed, Harrison felt peace settle over him like a warm blanket. The grief for Sarah would never fully disappear, but it no longer consumed him. He had room in his heart for both the past and the present, for honoring what he had lost while embracing what he had found. Annabel fell asleep in his arms, her breathing deep and even. Harrison stayed awake a while longer, listening to the sounds of the ranch at night and thinking about the future. There would be challenges ahead, he knew that. Danvers would not give up easily, and running a ranch was hard work in the best of times. But they would face everything together, and that made all the difference. The winter months tested them both. Danvers continued his harassment campaign, though he was clever enough to leave no direct evidence. More cattle went missing, though never enough at once to constitute a major loss. Fences were cut repeatedly, always in different locations, forcing Harrison and Annabel to ride the property lines constantly. But they persevered, supporting each other through the frustrations and setbacks. They were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together and trusting each other's judgment. The ranch not only survived, but began to thrive under their joint care. In February, Annabel discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy tempered by concern. A baby would make everything more complicated, especially with the ongoing troubles with Danvers. But it was also a sign of hope, new life growing from the love they shared. "We should tell Tom and Martha," Harrison suggested one evening as they discussed the pregnancy. "We might need extra help once the baby comes," agreed, "and maybe it is time to hire another permanent hand. The ranch can support it now, and I will not be able to work as hard in the coming months." Annabel rested a hand on her still flat stomach, wonder in her eyes. "A baby, Harrison." "We are going to have a baby." "We are," he agreed, pulling her close and pressing a kiss to her temple. "And we are going to be wonderful parents." Spring arrived with new grass and wildflowers carpeting the rangeland. Annabel's pregnancy progressed normally, though she stubbornly continued working longer than Harrison would have preferred. They hired a young man named James to help with the daily work, giving Harrison time to focus on larger improvements to the ranch. It was mid-May when things came to a head with Danvers. Harrison was working on a new corral when he spotted smoke rising from the southern section of the property. His heart lurched with fear as he ran for his horse, shouting for James to get Annabel to safety. He rode hard toward the smoke, dreading what he would find. One of the storage sheds was fully engulfed in flames, months of carefully stored hay going up in smoke. And standing nearby, making no attempt to flee or hide, was the scarred man who had ridden with Danvers months ago. Harrison pulled his revolver as he approached, fury and fear warring in his chest. "Step away from the fire." The man turned with a nasty smile. "Or what? You will shoot me, go ahead. Danvers will make sure you hang for it. I will take my chances." Harrison kept his gun trained on the arsonist while trying to think of the best course of action. He needed this man alive to testify against Danvers, but he also needed to protect his property and his pregnant wife. The decision was taken from his hands when Sheriff Davis arrived with a small posse, apparently drawn by the smoke. Harrison expected the worst, fully prepared for the sheriff to arrest him rather than the actual criminal. But Davis surprised him. "That is far enough, Crane," the sheriff called out to the scarred man. "Put your hands up where I can see them." "On what charge?" Crane demanded, though he raised his hands. "I was just riding by and saw the fire." "We will start with arson and go from there." "I have been watching Danvers's operation for months now, waiting for him to get sloppy. Congratulations, you are the evidence I needed." Davis gestured to his deputies, who moved in to arrest Crane. Harrison lowered his gun, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "You knew Danvers was behind the thefts and vandalism," suspected, but could not prove it, had to catch one of his men in the act. Davis looked at the burning shed with regret. "Sorry it had to come to this, but at least now we can put a stop to it." The fire was eventually contained, though the shed and its contents were a total loss. But the arrest of Crane led to more arrests, including Danvers himself, when Crane turned evidence against his employer in exchange for a lighter sentence. The whole criminal operation came crashing down, revealing that Danvers had been systematically driving out small ranchers throughout the region. "It is over," Annabel said that evening as they surveyed the damage to their property. "We can finally focus on building our future without constantly watching our backs." "It is over," Harrison agreed, wrapping an arm around his wife's expanding waist. "And our future is looking pretty good from where I am standing." The baby, a healthy boy they named Henry, arrived in late July. Harrison held his son for the first time with trembling hands, and a heart so full he thought it might burst. This tiny person represented everything he had thought lost, the chance for family and love, and a legacy that would outlive him. Annabel recovered quickly from the birth, though Harrison insisted she take it easy and let him and James handle the bulk of the ranch work. She spent her days caring for Henry and managing the household, seeming content with the arrangement despite her independent nature. As summer turned to autumn, Harrison reflected on how much his life had changed in just over a year. He had arrived at this ranch broken and hopeless, certain he would never feel whole again. But Annabel had given him purpose and love and now a family. She had not fixed him exactly, but she had given him the space and support to heal himself. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Henry sleep in his cradle, Annabel leaned against Harrison's shoulder with a contented sigh. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "That day I found you mending fences," Harrison replied honestly. "I thought I was just helping with a repair job, but you were actually mending something much more important." "What is that?" "My broken heart. Post by post, day by day, you helped put it back together." He kissed the top of her head gently. "I will never be able to thank you enough for that." "You do not need to thank me. We mended each other, Harrison. I was broken too in my own way, lonely and scared and trying to hold everything together alone. You gave me partnership and love and the courage to keep fighting for what I wanted." She tilted her face up to kiss him properly. "We saved each other." Harrison had to agree. What they had built together was stronger than either could have created alone. The ranch thrived under their joint care, growing and prospering year by year. They added to the herd, improved the buildings, and established a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. More children followed Henry. A daughter named Rose 2 years later, then twin boys, Samuel and Simon, 3 years after that. The house rang with laughter and life, filled with the sounds of a happy family. Harrison marveled sometimes at the abundance of blessings that had come from such a dark beginning. Tom and Martha became like family, their own children growing up alongside Harrison and Annabel's brood. James proved himself invaluable and eventually became the ranch foreman, freeing Harrison and Annabel to focus on the business side of the operation and raising their children. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Harrison watched his children grow, teaching them to ride and rope and care for the land the way Annabel's father had taught her. He made sure they knew about Sarah too, telling them stories about the woman he had loved first, wanting them to understand that loving someone lost did not diminish the love he had for their mother. Annabel never seemed threatened by those stories. She understood, as few people could, that hearts were indeed bigger than anyone realized, capable of holding both grief and joy, past and present, sorrow and celebration. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison arranged for Tom and Martha to watch the children while he and Annabel took a rare day off. They rode out to the creek where Harrison had first made camp, the place where so much had begun. The cottonwoods were taller now, and the creek ran as clear and cold as ever. They spread a blanket in the shade and ate the picnic lunch Annabel had prepared, talking about the past decade and all that had changed. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked. "Marrying a broken drifter instead of holding out for someone whole. You were not broken, just wounded. There is a difference." Annabel poured them both coffee from a thermos. "And no, I have never regretted it for a moment. You are the best man I have ever known, Harrison Xavier. You made me happier than I ever dreamed possible. You did the same for me, gave me a reason to live again when I thought I had none, gave me a family and a home and a purpose." He took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band that had not left her finger in 10 years. "I love you more today than the day we married, if that is possible." "It is possible. I feel the same way." She kissed him softly, sweetly, with all the love and tenderness that had sustained them through a decade of building a life together. They stayed by the creek until late afternoon, talking and laughing and simply enjoying each other's company without the constant demands of ranch work and children. It was a gift, these quiet hours, a reminder of why they worked so hard and what they were building together. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, they packed up their things and rode back to the ranch. The children rushed out to greet them, Henry now a responsible 10-year-old, Rose a precocious 8, and the twins rambunctious 5-year-olds who never seemed to run out of energy. Harrison swung down from his horse and scooped up the twins, one in each arm, while Rose attached herself to his leg, and Henry took his horse's reins with the seriousness of a boy learning to be a man. Annabel watched with a smile, her heart in her eyes. This was the life they had built together, messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. The ranch was prosperous, the children healthy and happy, and their love had only deepened with time. It was more than Harrison had ever hoped for when he rode aimlessly through the Colorado Territory all those years ago, lost and grieving. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Henry grew into a fine young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Rose proved to have a head for business, keeping meticulous records and helping Annabel manage the financial side of the operation. The twins were inseparable, two halves of a whole, working together with an almost telepathic understanding. Harrison's hair went gray at the temples, and Annabel developed laugh lines around her eyes, but they both remained strong and active, still working the ranch together every day. They had hired more hands over the years as the operation grew, but the core work was still done by family. On quiet evenings when the children were settled and the ranch work was done, Harrison and Annabel would sit on the porch as they had from the very beginning. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they read, and sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars emerge. "Do you think about her still?" Annabel asked one such evening, not needing to specify who she meant. "Sometimes," Harrison admitted. "Less often as the years go by, but yes. I think about what she would have thought of all this if she would have approved of the life I built after losing her. I think she would have wanted you to be happy. Anyone who loved you would want that. I am happy. Happier than I have any right to be." He squeezed her hand gently. "You gave me that, Annabel. You took a broken man and loved him back to wholeness." "We did that for each other," she corrected gently. "I was lost too, remember, trying to run a ranch alone, terrified of failing and losing everything my father built. You gave me partnership and support and love when I desperately needed all three." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the grass. "You remember that first day?" Harrison asked. "When I rode up and found you wrestling with that fence," Annabel laughed. "How could I forget?" This dusty stranger offering to help, looking like he had lost everything and was just barely holding himself together. "I had lost everything, or thought I had. Turns out I was wrong. I had just lost one thing, one piece of my life. There was so much more waiting to be found." He turned to look at her in the starlight, this woman who had saved him without even trying. "You were mending that fence, but you were mending me too, piece by piece, day by day. And you were doing the same for me. We mended each other, Harrison. Built something strong and lasting from our broken pieces." She stood and held out her hand. "Come on, let us go to bed. Tomorrow we'll be busy." Harrison took her hand and let her pull him to his feet. Tomorrow would indeed be busy, as every day on a ranch was busy. But it would also be good, filled with purposeful work and family, and the quiet contentment of a life well lived. As they headed inside, Harrison paused to look back at the darkened ranch spread out before him. The barn he had repaired stood sturdy and strong. The fences he and Annabel had mended together marked clean property lines. The cattle bearing their brand grazed peacefully in the distance. And inside the house, their children slept safe and warm. It was everything he never knew he needed, born from a chance encounter and a woman's willingness to let a broken stranger help with her fence. Sometimes Harrison thought about what would have happened if he had ridden past that day, if he had not stopped to offer assistance. Would he have drunk himself to death in some dusty town, drifted until he simply faded away? He would never know, and he was grateful he did not have to. The years continued their steady march, bringing the changes that time always brings. Henry married a sensible young woman from Colorado City and brought her home to the ranch, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations as Harrison and Annabel eased into a well-earned semi-retirement. Rose went east to school, but returned with newfound knowledge that helped expand the ranch's business opportunities. The twins proved as devoted to the land as their older siblings, working together to improve the herd quality and land management. Harrison became a grandfather, then a grandfather many times over, as his children built families of their own. He delighted in the little ones, teaching them to ride and rope just as he had taught their parents. Annabel was a natural grandmother, patient and loving, always ready with cookies and stories. They celebrated their 25th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, the house barely able to contain everyone. Harrison looked at the gathering and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. From grief and loss had come all this abundance, this legacy of love and family and honest work. "Quite a crowd," Annabel murmured, standing beside him and surveying their descendants with pride. "Quite a life," Harrison corrected. "Thank you for sharing it with me. The privilege was mine." She leaned against his shoulder, still fitting perfectly after all these years. "I found you mending my fence, but you gave me so much more." "We gave each other everything," Harrison said, wrapping an arm around his wife's waist. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." The party continued late into the night, filled with laughter and music and the warmth of family love. Harrison danced with Annabel, their movements still synchronized after decades of partnership. He danced with his daughters and daughters-in-law, with granddaughters who reminded him so much of their grandmother at that age. When the last guest had finally departed, and the house was quiet again, Harrison and Annabel walked out to the porch one more time. It was their ritual, their sacred space, where so much of their relationship had unfolded over the years. 25 years, Annabel marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together." "Both are true," Harrison said. "Time is strange that way." They stood looking out over the ranch, bathed in moonlight and possibility. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. The wind whispered through the grass like a gentle song. And two people who had found each other when they needed it most stood together, still mending fences, still building futures, still deeply and completely in love. The years grew shorter as Harrison and Annabel grew older, but their love remained constant. They handed over more responsibility to their children, but never fully retired, still riding out to check on cattle or inspect fences when their bodies allowed. The ranch was in their blood, part of who they were, impossible to completely leave behind. Harrison was 72 when his health began to fail. His heart, the doctor said, weakened from a lifetime of hard work and the stresses of ranching life. Annabel fussed over him, making him rest when he wanted to work, insisting he take the medicine the doctor prescribed. "I am not dying anytime soon," Harrison protested one afternoon when she caught him trying to sneak out to the barn. "Good, because I am not finished with you yet." Annabel guided him back to the porch chair firmly. "Sit. Enjoy the sunshine. The ranch will survive without you for one afternoon." He sat, because arguing with Annabel had never gotten him anywhere. She settled into the chair beside him, taking his hand in hers. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ranch continue its daily rhythms without their direct involvement. "I've been thinking about that first day a lot lately," Harrison said eventually. "Finding you with that fence, deciding to help instead of riding on. It was the best decision I ever made." "Second best," Annabel corrected with a smile. "The best was deciding to stay. Fair point." He squeezed her hand gently, feeling the familiar calluses from decades of ranch work. "I love you, Annabel Xavier. Have I told you that recently? This morning, actually, but I never get tired of hearing it." She lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to his knuckles. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They sat together as the sun traced its path across the sky, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from broken pieces. The ranch thrived around them, evidence of their hard work and devotion. Their children and grandchildren carried on the legacy they had established, ensuring the land would be cared for and loved for generations to come. Harrison lived another 5 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born and watch the ranch expand beyond anything he and Annabel had originally dreamed. He passed peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, Annabel beside him, their hands linked as they had been for nearly 40 years of marriage. At his funeral, all 4 of their children spoke, sharing memories of a father who had taught them the value of honest work, the importance of family, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Henry told the story of how his parents met, Harrison helping a stubborn woman mend a fence and finding so much more. "My father used to say that Mom was mending his broken heart while she mended that fence," Henry concluded, his voice thick with emotion. "I did not understand what he meant when I was young, but watching them together all these years, seeing the love and partnership they shared, I get it now. They saved each other, built something lasting from pain and loss. That is the real legacy they left us, not just this ranch, but the example of what love can do when two people commit to building a life together." Annabel lived another 3 years after Harrison's death, remaining active and engaged with the ranch and her family until the very end. She never remarried, content with the memories of the great love she had known. When she passed, also peacefully in her sleep, she was laid to rest beside Harrison in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to work the land, each generation adding their own improvements while honoring the foundation Harrison and Annabel had established. The ranch remained in the family for over a century, a testament to what two broken people had created when they chose to mend each other along with a simple fence. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the work was done and the stars emerged overhead, those who lived on the ranch could almost feel the presence of the couple who had started it all. Harrison and Annabel, forever bound by love and partnership, their spirits woven into the very fabric of the land they had devoted their lives to nurturing. The story of how they met became family legend, passed down through the generations. A grieving man who stopped to help a struggling woman with a fence repair and found healing in her strength and independence. A lonely woman who accepted help from a stranger and discovered a partner who would stand beside her through every challenge life brought. Two broken hearts that mended each other, piece by piece, creating something whole and beautiful and lasting. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West of 1873 and continuing to inspire long after both lovers had passed into memory. But they were never truly gone, not as long as the ranch remained and the family they created continued to thrive. Their legacy lived on in every fence mended, every calf born, every challenge faced with determination and partnership. Harrison Xavier had ridden into Colorado territory looking for nothing more than an escape from his pain. He found Annabel Carson mending a fence and realized, slowly and surely, that she was mending his broken heart too. Together they built a life, a family, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was more than either had dreamed possible on that first dusty afternoon when a stranger offered to help, and a woman took a chance on accepting. Their love story proved that even the deepest wounds could heal, that new love did not diminish old love, and that sometimes the most important repairs were not to fences or buildings but to the human heart. Harrison and Annabel understood that truth, lived it every day of their marriage, and left it as a gift to all who came after them. And so the ranch continued, generation after generation, built on a foundation of love between two people who had each thought themselves broken beyond repair. They had been wrong. With patience, partnership, and devotion, they had mended each other completely, creating something far stronger than either could have achieved alone. That was their true legacy, the knowledge that love could heal, restore, and create beauty from even the most painful beginnings. The fence Harrison helped Annabel repair on that first day stood for many years, a silent witness to where it all began. Eventually, it needed replacing, as all things do. But the new fence was built by their children, then their grandchildren, each generation maintaining what the founders had started. and with every post set and every wire strung, they remembered the story of how it all began with a simple act of kindness and a willingness to let healing happen.